Hi class, we need to take a look at example 3, and the main objective with these type of problems is going to be to simplify it. Now, let's take a look at the first set of problems, and we're just using basic properties. So for example, the first one says 3 divided by 1. Well, this is equal to 3. Any number divided by 1, it's just going to be the original number. 3 divided by 0, in this case, is undefined. And the software, this is from the software, wants you to write D and E, meaning the division or the ratio does not exist. Make sure you don't confuse it with 0 divided by the values of 3. In this case, your answer is 0. And then 3 divided by 3 is equal to 1. For any other problem that they want you to do a division by 0, the proper answer would be undefined, except that here I got it from the software, so they want you to write it as D and E. Let's move on to problem 2. And remember that when you're looking at the absolute value of any number is the distance away from 0. So in this case, the absolute value of negative 154, this is equal to 154, since technically it's talking about a distance and they're looking at the negative numbers. Let me just draw it to make sure this is clear. So technically you're looking at 0. This value here is negative 154. Now, since absolute value represents distance, the distance from negative 154 to 0, it's 154 units in terms of distance. So that's why we always express it as a positive value. Let's move on to the next problem. Okay, the next problem has several minor properties that we need to go over. And the first one is if you have a negative value, and this is quantity negative squared, this one represents negative 2 times negative 2, which in this case, it'll be positive 4. Now, this is not to be confused with problem B. In problem B, your exponent is only with a 2. So this one reads negative 2 times 2 or negative 4. So in this case, A and B are completely different problems. Moving on to C, we have to be a little bit careful on C because we technically have a negative, and then the exponent is only with a negative 2 times negative 2. As you multiply these values, multiplying the actual numerical values, you're going to get technically a negative and a positive 4. So from the multiplication of those two negatives, you're going to get a positive value. But there's a negative on the outside, so your final answer is going to be negative 4. And it is slightly different than A and B. Let me just display those again here. Next problem, D, absolute value of negative 2. This one's just going to be 2. Negative 2 is 2 distance away from 0. And remember that the vertical bars mean absolute value. Next problem, this one technically it's read as the negative. So this will be equal to negative. Absolute value of negative 2 will be simply 2. And let me just put an arrow here to indicate that we evaluated the absolute value. But then we still have a negative on the outside. So final answer is going to be negative 2. Next problem, we're dividing two negatives. The negatives cancel. And then this one, you're technically just dividing 8 divided by 2, which is positive 4. So for this set of problem, we have several of the properties that get misunderstood on basic algebra. I'll just display them here once more. And once again, as you're dealing with exponents, you have to be clear where the exponent is being placed at. Like A is being placed on the whole -2, B it's only on the 2. Let's move on to example 4, and they want us to evaluate by order of operations. Let me start working with these two. Now your LCD is equal to 12. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rewrite it and then input the LCD. So this will be 5 sixths minus then 1/4 plus 1/3. And we're going to place the LCD. So in order to get a 12, you have to multiply times 3 and times 3, the first fraction, then times 4 and times 4. And this is going to be equivalent to 5 sixths minus 3 twelfths plus 4 twelfths. Or, and let me just rewrite it down here. In this case, 5 sixths minus, and adding the numerical values inside of the parentheses, it's just going to give us a 7 twelfths. And in this case, we're looking at 5 sixths minus 7 twelfths. And then we can get an LCD of 12. So multiply times 2 and times 2. So we're looking at, this is 10 twelfths minus 7 twelfths, or the values of 3 twelfths, which actually reduces 3 times 1 and 3 times 4. And we end up with 1/4. Let me check again the numbers. So this is going to be 10 minus 7. That's 3/12. It reduces to 1/4. Okay, that's it for these problems. I'll put the other ones on another video.